You know, when we picture the president, we're seeing more than 200 years of history. But what about the very first one? He didn't have a guide, no history to look back on, no playbook whatsoever. So in this explainer, we're going to see how George Washington didn't just step into a job, he had to build it from scratch with the whole world watching.
I mean, really, think about that for a second. How do you do a job that's never, ever been done before? Imagine someone just hands you the keys to a brand new country and says, "All right, you're in charge. Good luck with that." That was the absolutely incredible challenge facing America's first president.
So back in 1789, the Constitution gets approved, right? But the actual job of president, well, it was basically just a few paragraphs on paper. It was this totally radical new idea, a government without a king. And honestly, nobody was really sure how or even if it was going to work.
So this meant that everything Washington did would set a precedent, an example for every president who came after him. The big problem, though, there were zero examples for him. He was completely walking into uncharted territory.
And the brand new nation was really caught in a tough spot. I mean, they had just fought this long, bloody war to get away from a king, so understandably, a lot of Americans were terrified that the presidency could just turn into another monarchy. But at the same time, without a strong leader at the center, the whole country could just fall apart. It was a real case of fear versus need.
So, who could possibly walk that tightrope? Who could you trust with that kind of power? Well, there was really only one name on everybody's lips: George Washington. Thanks to his incredible leadership as a general during the Revolution, people just had this immense respect for him. They truly believed he was the one person who wouldn't let all that power go to his head.
Okay, so how much did they trust him? Well, let's just say the vote was unanimous. 100%. Every single elector voted for Washington. To this day, it's the only time in American history that's ever happened. Just incredible.
All right, so armed with that unprecedented level of trust, Washington got to work. And since he had no guide, his every move, both big and small, was going to become a page in the unwritten presidential playbook for centuries.
And it all kicked off on April 30th, 1789. At the very first inauguration, Washington takes the oath of office. Now, this public ceremony wasn't just some stuffy formality. No way! It was this incredibly powerful symbol of a peaceful transfer of power, from the people to the leader they chose.
So right after taking the oath, Washington gives a speech. Now, that might seem totally obvious to us today, but here's the thing. Nobody told him he had to. He just did it. And with that one simple act, he created a tradition, the inaugural address, that every single president has followed ever since.
But his precedence went way beyond just speeches. He was literally building the machinery of government. For instance, he formed a cabinet of advisors, to get expert opinions on his decisions. He also backed a really controversial plan for a national bank to get the economy on its feet, a move that sparked some fierce debate. And he started the whole tradition of reporting to Congress to make sure everything was transparent.
And that whole idea of a presidential cabinet, that's not actually in the Constitution. Washington just knew he couldn't be an expert on everything. It just makes sense, right? So he created this group of advisors himself. It was such a practical, brilliant move that made the executive branch way more effective right from day one.
Okay, so the Constitution says the president has to report to Congress on the State of the Union, but it's pretty vague on how. So Washington decided, hey, I'm just going to go give a speech in person each year. This created a direct line of communication between the two branches, and just like that, another tradition was born.
But Washington's influence wasn't just about traditions and policies. He literally shaped the nation's physical landscape by overseeing the creation of a brand new capital city from the ground up.
I mean, a new country needs a new capital, right? So Congress picked a spot right along the Potomac River. Maryland and Virginia both donated the land for it. And of course, it was named in Washington's honor. The city's grand design was planned by an architect named Pierre Charles L'Enfant, who imagined this amazing capital, totally worthy of a great new republic.
And get this wasn't some project he just delegated from his desk. No, in 1793, Washington himself was right there, on site, laying the actual cornerstone for the U.S. Capitol building. He was building the government both in theory and literally in stone. Now we have to talk about one of the key figures in this massive project, a man named Benjamin Banneker.
He was a brilliant, self-taught astronomer and surveyor, and as an African-American man, his contribution was huge. His knowledge of the stars was absolutely essential for plotting the precise boundaries for the new capital city.
Okay, so after 8 years of basically inventing an office and building a nation, we get to Washington's final and perhaps most lasting legacy.
As he was leaving office, he gave the country one last really important piece of advice. He warned the young nation not to get tangled up in the conflicts of other countries by forming permanent alliances. He was convinced it would just drag America into foreign wars. And you know what? For many, many years, future leaders took that advice to heart.
So when Washington died in 1799, the entire nation mourned. Henry Lee, a man who'd served under him in the Revolution, gave this really famous tribute that just perfectly captured how the country felt. It really speaks to his leadership on the battlefield, his guidance in building the government, and just the deep, deep respect people had for him.
So in the end, Washington's greatest legacy wasn't just one law or one military victory. It was the office itself. He's the one who defined it. He proved that a president could be a strong, effective leader without becoming a king. And that set the standard for everyone who followed. He wasn't just the first president, he was the blueprint for the presidency itself.
So Washington's actions set precedents that have lasted for centuries. And it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? In our own lives, what precedent, what example set by a leader has mattered the most to you?